have a realization of, what particular team I have been a part of in that particular year. And, understanding this year, we fought and we played to the maximum ability of our team. But ultimately, if we're being completely honest, we were out-talented. We were not outworked. We were not, they didn't out-physical us. They didn't outsmart us. I feel like we were just out-talent.
LeBron James sat down on his own podcast, looked Steve Nash directly in the eye, and said the Lakers lost because they were simply out-talented. Not enough talent on the roster. And the moment those words hit the internet, people immediately caught something that made the whole thing almost impossible to process with a straight face. The roster he just labeled as lacking talent, he constructed it, including the piece on that roster wearing his own last name. Be honest in the comments. When LeBron said his team fell short in the talent department, do you think he genuinely forgot that he personally pushed his own son onto that exact roster? Or did he simply not care how that statement would land? Let us go straight to what was actually said, because the quote itself is really the entire story here. On the May 21st episode of Mind the Game, LeBron James told Steve Nash that if they were being completely transparent with each other, the Lakers were out-talented.
At the same time, not getting swept up in the noise that surrounds our game.
Yeah, and I understand that. You get caught up in ring culture and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, there's 29 teams, if that's the case, who are all failures, if that's always the narrative. Because there's only one champion, every year. So, I have the passion and the admiration to host the Le3wBron Trophy up every single year, but I also have a realization of, what particular team I have been a part of in that particular year. And, understanding this year, we fought and we played to the maximum ability of our team. But ultimately, if we're being completely honest, we were out-talented. We were not outworked. We were not, they didn't out-physical us. They didn't out.
And in case anyone assumed it was an accidental slip of the tongue, he doubled down and reinforced the point. They failed in talent. Oklahoma City simply had more of it than the Lakers did. That was his official explanation for the loss. Not execution breakdowns, not coaching decisions, not his own performance in critical fourth-quarter moments. Talent. The roster just did not have enough of it. Now, here is where this gets genuinely rich. For 2 consecutive years, LeBron James made it his very public mission to get Bronny James into a Lakers uniform. He told the entire league he would sign with whatever team drafted his son. He pushed for it openly. He campaigned for it loudly and without apology.
Talking about the player that the Lakers just drafted in the second round, that will undeniably be a part of LeBron's legacy, playing with his son. How cool is that going to be next season?
It's probably, when it comes to basketball, it's the greatest accomplishment that I've ever had. Done it all as an individual, but there's no greater accomplishment that would be to overtake me being on the same floor as my son. So
he made the family reunion storyline a priority that the entire organization had to structure itself around. And then, after engineering all of that, he sat down on a podcast and announced to millions of listeners that his team came up short because of a lack of talent. He described his own roster as not good enough, and his own son is on that roster. You do not get to build the team, insert your child into it, and then go on a public platform and call the whole thing untalented without that statement landing directly on the player you fought hardest to bring in. Let us talk about the numbers, because the numbers are where this becomes impossible to argue with. Bronny James this season averaged 2.9 points, 0.5 rebounds, and 1.2 assists per game across 42 appearances at 8.9 minutes a night. There is a game against the Minnesota Timberwolves early in the season where he played 5 minutes and recorded 0 points, 0 rebounds, and 0 assists, while opposing guards attacked him directly. His college numbers at USC told a similar story before he was ever drafted. 4.8 points, 2.8 rebounds, shooting 36.6% from the field and 26.7% from three. Those are not lottery pick numbers. They are not even second-round numbers by conventional standards. So when LeBron says the roster failed in the talent department, the data confirms he is at least partially describing his own son's contribution to that team. That is what makes the quote land as hard as it does. The context surrounding the series makes the blame shifting even harder to accept. The Lakers were already operating short-handed. Luka Doncic was managing a grade 2 hamstring strain. Austin Reeves missed 4 of the 6 games with an oblique injury. This was precisely the moment a player who has spent 2 decades positioning himself as an all-time great is supposed to absorb that pressure, carry the load, and protect his injured teammates from outside criticism. Instead, LeBron went to his own podcast and positioned himself as a victim of circumstance. He created distance between himself and the result and pointed the finger directly at the talent level surrounding him. The man who shapes the roster does not get to act surprised by what the roster produces. Lakers insider Jovan Buha framed it with precision, stating that the comment was a thinly veiled shot directed at the front office and the organization, and that this pattern of LeBron taking those kinds of shots has been building over the last several years.
As he talked about the Lakers not having the requisite talent, and not that it was not that they were out-coached by OKC, they were not out-hustled by OKC, they were not out-physicaled by OKC. It was actually talent. They were out-talented by OKC. And that was a not-so-veiled shot at the front office, at the organization. And he's taken those before over the last few years in terms of talking about the roster and the Lakers' lack of talent and the lack of firepower relative to the other top teams in the league. There's the matter of like what type of contract he wants and what the Lakers are willing to offer. There's a matter of, is he willing to take a pay cut for that? And whether he is or not, like what would constitute him wanting to return? What is the level that he wants the roster to get to where he feels like, okay, I want to be here. I want to be a part.
According to Buha, LeBron used that platform deliberately, shifting blame away from his own performance and placing it squarely on management's shoulders, effectively building himself a protective narrative before the off-season conversations even began. And that move reportedly generated genuine anger inside the organization. High-ranking Lakers executives are furious because they sacrificed long-term roster flexibility and absorbed significant public criticism to accommodate LeBron's personal family goals, only to have him turn around and publicly suggest they never gave him enough to work with. The behind-the-scenes maneuvering that got Bronny onto the team is its own story entirely. LeBron spent 2 years signaling to every front office in the league that he would sign with whatever team drafted his son. That posture alone poisoned the normal pre-draft evaluation process because every GM understood the situation was being steered toward one specific outcome. Rich Paul reportedly reached out to rival front offices and communicated that if they selected Bronny in the second round, he would simply go play overseas instead. That effectively cleared the path and backed the Lakers into a corner with nowhere to go. ESPN reported that owner Jeannie Buss was privately frustrated with the level of control LeBron and Clutch Sports had accumulated over the organization's decision-making. She reportedly felt pressured into extending a contract she had serious reservations about, fully aware the franchise was about to absorb public criticism over the nepotism of the situation. Things reportedly became tense enough that she even explored the possibility of trading LeBron to the Clippers entirely, just to break free from the constant power struggles.
And perhaps most damaging of all, she did not even feel LeBron expressed genuine gratitude for the organization bending to draft his son in the first place. Look at the complete picture. An owner compromised her own standing and the franchise's future to accommodate a player's personal wishes out of obligation. And months later, that same player went on his own podcast and effectively told the world her management decisions left him without enough talent to compete. He did not just bite the hand that fed him, he bit the hand that fed his son as well. The structural damage runs deep. By burning a roster spot and locking in guaranteed salary on Bronny, the Lakers eliminated their own flexibility to make meaningful moves. They had nothing left to trade or spend on a genuine 3-and-D wing or a physical backup big, exactly the types of players they needed to prevent Oklahoma City from running them off the floor when it mattered most. The outside voices were direct about it. Doug Gottlieb said plainly on live television that Bronny is simply not an NBA-caliber player at this stage of his development, and that LeBron forced the situation because he had enough leverage to do so. Adam Finkelstein from 247 Sports added that LeBron has influenced more front office decisions than any player in league history, and had been constructing this situation for 2 years with little apparent concern for whether his son actually possessed the ability to contribute at this level. LeBron pressured the franchise, got exactly what he wanted, and then used the talent gap he personally created as his explanation for the losses. Now, here is where the story shifts into territory nobody anticipated. Bronny reportedly became aware of his father's comments. The fundamental expectation of being a sports parent is that you protect your child above everything else. Instead, LeBron went on a globally distributed platform and framed his son's roster as a talent failure in order to protect his own reputation. Bronny allegedly communicated to people close to him that while his father is entitled to his opinions, those opinions are not always correct. The exhaustion embedded in that response is palpable. A 21-year-old arriving at the realization that he was brought into a situation to serve his father's personal ambitions, and the moment things went sideways, he became the most convenient target. And this friction did not materialize without warning. Bronny signaled all of this before he ever wore a Lakers uniform. At the 2024 Draft Combine, he told a room full of reporters that his lifelong goal was to build his own identity in this league, and that playing alongside his father was never actually something he had envisioned for himself, even though LeBron had raised the idea on multiple occasions. The subtext was unmistakable. Bronny never wanted an engineered path. He wanted to develop through the normal process and earn his place without the entire basketball world positioned and waiting for him to fail. His father redirected that path entirely, and now Bronny exists in an impossible situation, posting zeros against Minnesota, while his father presents himself as an uninvolved party who simply found himself on an under-talented roster. What makes everything darker is that this is not simply a strained family dynamic playing out privately. LeBron signed a substantial multi-year deal with Amazon to distribute Mind the Game across Prime Video, Amazon Music, Fire TV, and YouTube. So when he sits in that studio and characterizes his roster as lacking talent, he is not having a candid conversation with a friend. He is treating his own son's public humiliation as content with commercial value attached to it. The show's stated purpose is to give LeBron control over his own narrative and allow him to shape how his legacy gets discussed publicly. Translated directly, he built a media operation designed to protect his image. And if a 21-year-old becomes collateral damage in that process, that's apparently an acceptable cost.
Skip Bayless identified this pattern years ago, calling LeBron the most sophisticated media manipulator the sport has ever produced. And this is not an isolated incident. This is a 2-decade operating model. Go back to the 2011 finals when his Miami team collapsed against Dirk Nowitzki and the Dallas Mavericks. LeBron averaged 17 points and repeatedly disappeared in fourth quarters when the games were decided. Rather than accepting accountability at the podium, he told the fans rooting against him that they would have to wake up the next morning and return to the same lives they were already living, positioning himself as above the criticism rather than answerable to it. Trace it to the summer of 2010, when he commandeered a television network to announce he was leaving Cleveland for Miami in a spectacle that publicly humiliated an entire franchise and fan base. Michael Jordan responded to that moment by noting he would never have considered joining Larry Bird or Magic Johnson because beating those men was the entire point of his competitive drive. The pattern keeps reappearing. When his Cleveland teammates suffered a historic 55-point loss to the Lakers, LeBron took to social media to post about karma and divine accountability, positioning himself as untouched by the result, while his teammates absorbed the fallout. He ran the same operation against head coach David Blatt in January 2016. Blatt was leading Cleveland to a 30-11 record at the top of the Eastern Conference when he was fired. The first coach in modern NBA history dismissed while leading his conference because LeBron and Rich Paul had been working behind the scenes to install Tyronn Lue instead. By that point, LeBron was effectively self-coaching, calling plays and rotating himself in and out of games with minimal deference to the bench. The blueprint never changes. Short-term contracts with player options are designed to hold franchises in a state of permanent uncertainty, pressuring front offices into depleting their futures by trading developing pieces like Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, and Kyle Kuzma for veterans who could contribute immediately. Demanding overhauls like the Russell Westbrook experiment that left an organization years behind where it should have been. And the moment the chemistry breaks down, stepping back and expressing confusion about how it all went wrong. The Bronny situation is simply the most personal version of the same machine running its standard cycle. LeBron secures exactly what he wants and then redirects accountability toward the outcome he engineered. The contrast with how genuine legends navigated adversity is what ultimately exposes the pattern most clearly. When Michael Jordan was being physically punished by the bad boy Pistons year after year, he never went in front of cameras and suggested his supporting cast was insufficient. He pulled Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant through grueling off-season preparation, stood at every podium and absorbed the losses publicly, and drove his roster to evolve through the difficulty. When Kobe Bryant was sharing a floor with Smush Parker and Kwame Brown, or processing the pain of the 2008 finals loss to Boston, his public messaging was never a subtle commentary on Mitch Kupchak's roster construction decisions. It was about personal execution and finding ways to compete regardless of what surrounded him. Those players made demands of their organizations privately when necessary, but when the cameras turned on, they took the responsibility for their team's shortcomings without deflection. LeBron operates from the opposite position, using a produced digital platform to separate his individual performance from his team's failures, while those around him absorb the weight of the narrative. The production numbers for Bronny make the talent comment impossible to interpret as anything other than what it plainly was: 2.9 points, 0.5 rebounds, 8.9 minutes per game. A complete statistical zero against Minnesota. Those are not the numbers of a rotation player at this level. They are the numbers of someone who occupies a roster spot for reasons disconnected from on-court contribution. Charlie Villanueva said directly on his podcast that Bronny has no business being in the NBA at this stage. Comedian Ari Spears captured the broader frustration of longtime Lakers supporters by pointing out that a franchise built on the legacy of Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, Shaquille O'Neal, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kobe Bryant, and James Worthy had been reduced to operating as a private development program for a billionaire's son. And then comes the statement that transformed this into the defining off-season story.
On that same podcast episode, LeBron explicitly acknowledged that he understands he is entering free agency and retains control over his next destination. He said it plainly and deliberately. So the franchise that just got publicly characterized as untalented by the player it sacrificed its future to accommodate now has to determine whether to continue down that road. Front office leadership is reportedly prepared to respond decisively this offseason rather than absorb another round of the same dynamic. The player who shaped the roster, inserted his son into it, labeled the result a talent failure, and then reminded everyone he controls his own future. That is the reality the Los Angeles Lakers are navigating right now. LeBron finally said what the evidence had been pointing toward all season. He told the truth about the talent level on his roster. He simply overlooked the fact that he was the one who assembled it, and that the least productive piece on that roster shares his last name.